Welcome to Storycraft Portal, where every true story is more than just headlines. It's a journey of emotion, truth, and unforgettable human experience. Today, we unravel a chilling and deeply emotional case that spans decades. A young boy, Reggie Reed, just 6 years old, loses his mother in a brutal murder. Years later, the very man who once held his hand, his own father, is accused and convicted of that same crime. This isn't just a murder case. It's a story of shattered trust, painful revelations, and a son caught between love and justice. Reggie Reed was just 6 years old when his world shattered. It was a regular summer day in Hammond, Louisiana, hot, humid, and full of childhood promise. Reggie waited by the window for his mom, Selonia Reed, to come home from work. She was always on time, but that day, she never arrived. Night fell, and worry turned into fear. Relatives called the police. By morning, Reggie's life had changed forever. Selonia's car was found abandoned. Inside, her lifeless body, bruised, beaten, and left in silence. The small town buzzed with questions, and a child sat alone, clinging to a photo of his mother. Who could have done this? Why her? And most haunting of all, why was his father so calm? This wasn't just a murder. It was the beginning of a mystery that would take nearly 30 years to unravel. In the days after Selonia's murder, the town whispered. Rumors swirled, but Reggie was too young to understand them. All he knew was that his mother was gone, and his father, Reginald Reed Sr., had become strangely distant. When questioned by police, Reginald claimed he was with Reggie the entire evening, watching TV, putting him to bed. A solid alibi. What child could deny that? Reggie, confused and grieving, repeated what his father told him. The case quickly went cold. With no witnesses and little evidence, the investigation stalled. Reggie grew up under the shadow of a murder that was never solved. And in the silence, suspicion quietly pointed toward the one man who was supposed to protect him. But for years, no one had the courage or the proof to confront him. And Reggie? He simply buried the memory, trying to believe in the father who. As the years passed, Reggie grew, but so did the shadows. His father rarely spoke of Selonia, brushing aside any questions with a cold glare or a sharp, let it go. Reggie learned not to ask, but the silence screamed. Every birthday, every holiday, every quiet moment echoed with his mother's absence. At school, Reggie struggled to focus, often daydreaming about what life would have been like if she were still alive. At night, he'd stare at the ceiling, trying to remember her voice. But time eroded the memories, leaving only fragments. Her smile, the way she smelled, the sound of her laugh. Deep inside, something didn't feel right. His father's behavior, the way he avoided the past, it all felt off. Still, Reggie carried on, pretending things were okay. But a seed had been planted, one that would grow into questions, and eventually, a truth more painful than he ever imagined. By the time Reggie turned 25, his mind had become a battleground. Questions he once buried began clawing their way to the surface. He remembered details that didn't add up. His father's calmness, the exactness of that alibi, the strange way he told Reggie what to say. One night, after a painful argument, Reggie confronted his father. Did you really stay home that night? Reginald's response was ice-cold silence. No denied, no anger, just a long stare that chilled Reggie to his core. That moment cracked something open. Reggie started digging. Old police files, newspaper clippings, anything he could find. And then he discovered something chilling. His mother had filed a police report just weeks before her death. Domestic violence. A cry for help. A warning sign no one took seriously. Reggie's world began to twist. The man he had trusted, even loved, was now a looming question mark. In 2019, Reggie's search collided with fate. A witness came forward, Jimmy Ray Barnes, an old family acquaintance, now imprisoned on unrelated charges. During a routine interview, he dropped a bombshell. Reginald Reed Sr. had confessed to the murder decades ago. According to Barnes, Reginald admitted he killed Selonia in a fit of rage, panicked, and used Reggie as his alibi. The confession wasn't recorded, but it was enough to reopen the case. For Reggie, it was like hearing thunder after years of silence. Shock, pain, a strange, hollow validation. The truth had lived in his bones for years, and now it had a voice. Investigators matched old DNA evidence from the crime scene with new samples, and slowly, the pieces began to fall into place. The past wasn't buried, it had been waiting. Reggie knew there was no turning back now. Reggie sat in the courtroom, heart pounding, as his father entered in handcuffs. It felt surreal. This man, who had once made him breakfast, now accused of murdering his mother. The prosecution laid out their case: the past abuse, the witness testimony, the DNA evidence. Reggie took the stand, his voice steady but shaking inside. He recounted that night, the TV, the bedtime routine, and the strange way his father had made him memorize the story. For years, he'd thought he was helping. Now, he realized he had been used. Across the room, Reginald didn't flinch. No parlé, no explanation, just the same cold stare from all those years ago. The jury listened closely, the weight of decades hanging in the air. Reggie had waited his whole life for this moment. It didn't feel like justice. It felt like mourning all over again. The room held its breath as the jury returned. We find a defendant, Reginald Reed Sr., guilty of second-degree murder. The words echoed like thunder. Reggie exhaled, but there was no relief, just a deep, aching sadness. His father was led away, expression unreadable. No last glance, no final words. For the public, it was justice delayed but delivered. For Reggie, it was a wound reopened. Reporters swarmed outside the courthouse. Cameras flashed, but inside he stood alone, a man who had lost both parents, one to death, the other to truth. That night, he visited his mother's grave for the first time in years. He didn't speak. He just stood there, letting the silence say everything. The pain hadn't gone. It had only changed shape. The mystery was solved, but the story, the loss, the trauma, would echo in him forever. Haunted but determined, Reggie turned to something he hadn't done in years, writing. Page after page, he poured out everything. His childhood, his memories of Selonia, the courtroom, the betrayal. He titled it the day my mother never came home. Writing was painful, but it brought clarity. Through words, he gave his mother a voice, preserved in ink and truth. The memoir quickly gained attention, raw, emotional, and brutally honest. Interviews followed, podcasts, even an appearance on national television. But for Reggie, it wasn't about fame. It was about honoring a mother stolen too soon and a truth buried too long. Readers connected deeply, many sharing their own stories of abuse and silence. Reggie realized he wasn't alone, and neither was Selonia. Her story had finally been heard, and through his pain, he had crafted purpose. Despite the book's success, Reggie often found himself staring into silence. Fame didn't heal wounds, it just gave them a spotlight. In quiet moments, he'd still hear his mother's laughter echo through old memories, and sometimes her silence spoke even louder. Therapy helped, slowly unraveling years of guilt and confusion. For so long, he believed he had failed her, as a witness, as a son. But now, he understood. He was a child caught in a storm not of his making. He began speaking at schools and community centers, sharing his story with other children growing up in chaos, hoping to spark awareness before tragedy struck again. Each time he told it, the pain lessened just a little. He had lost so much, but in his healing, he had become a voice for others. The past would never vanish, but it no longer owned him. He was finally stepping out of its shadow. It took 30 years, but the truth finally stood in the light. Reginald Reed Sr. died in prison in early 2025, silent to the end, never offering an apology. For Reggie, it didn't bring celebration, it brought peace. He visited Selonia's grave once more, this time with flowers, not questions. "It's over," he whispered. There would always be grief, but now there was no longer confusion. No more wondering, no more pretending. Selonia's name had been cleared of the shadows cast by silence and denial. Reggie founded a foundation in her name to support families affected by domestic violence, turning his pain into purpose. As he stood beneath the same sky his mother once looked up at, he didn't feel broken anymore. Just human, just healing. The case was closed, but the story would live on, crafted in truth, told in love, and carried forward by the son who refused to forget.